The Suez Crisis, the invasion of the Falkland Islands, the Brexit withdrawal agreement, and the death of Queen Elizabeth II. What do they all have in common with this Saturday? Yes, Parliament is being recalled for what looks like just the 6th time since the Second World War. All this to debate the nationalisation of British steel. My name's Tom Harwood and this is GBN Originals. Now, British steel has been in a rut for years. There has been a time and time again when various companies have come in, said that they couldn't run this industry profitably in this country anymore. There has been so much political and economic and business consternation over the fact of Britain producing steel. So much subsidy and so much negotiation. Could it all come to an end this weekend with a bill being put before the House by the government to nationalise it all? And would this actually save the industry from the fundamentals that have made it so uncompetitive and uneconomic? Yes, I'm talking about the fundamental cost of energy in the United Kingdom. The main reason, according to most economic analysis, why it is just so expensive to produce high energy intensive industry in this country, particularly industries like steel. The industrial cost of energy in the UK is twice or even sometimes 3 times as much as the cost of it in a place like the United States of America. It's no wonder why companies struggle to produce big energy intensive industry in this country. It's no wonder why there is constant political consternation, tax breaks, loans and government subsidy. Could it all be simpler for the government to simply nationalise the lot, for the taxpayer to be on the hook for this industry for the long term? Well, there are question marks as to whether or not this will be a sensible idea, given that the cost of energy isn't coming down anytime soon. Will this just be a laggard on the government, an expensive loss maker for the government to run fairly inefficiently at that? Or is it simply of such a critical, vital national importance that we keep this industry alive in this country, even if it operates at a loss? Well, those are some big questions, no doubt, that will be debated in Parliament on this extraordinary recalled Saturday sitting. I have to say I was there for the recollation of Parliament in the Brexit years, that Saturday sitting that was meant to push through the withdrawal agreement but fizzled out into a damp squib. The tension in the House of Commons was palpable, and it is really that scale of event that we're going to see in the House of Commons. This is clearly a massive issue for this government, and one that requires the weighty recall of Parliament in the middle of what is supposed to be the Easter holiday for members of Parliament. Some may have to be recalled from other parts of the world. Some will have to cut short their holidays and fly back to debate this issue of national import. But there is another question mark here. Why now? Why is the government deciding this moment to nationalise an industry that has been, frankly, on its last legs for quite some time? Some will say that Donald Trump's tariffs have pushed the United Kingdom into making this move, exporting goods made with steel, but also steel itself to the United States, a major customer for British steel. Well, that has just become more expensive thanks to the import taxes that Donald Trump has unilaterally imposed. But more than that, there's also the volatility in the energy market that has been going on for some time, and the recent announcement from the Prime Minister that more money will be spent on British defence. Yes, going up from 2% to 2.5% of GDP being spent on our armed forces, and a wider ambition to get up to 3% of GDP being spent on the British armed forces by a future timescale. Now, all of this extra investment means that we will need to be building more ships. We'll be needing to build more tanks. We'll need more equipment, quite frankly, to equip a better funded army. Could it be that this is also one of the calculations behind the nationalisation, at least the proposed nationalisation of British steel? And yet, as I keep saying, energy prices are still expensive. this will still be some of the most expensive steel to create anywhere in the world. Is it better for the army to use British steel, even though it might cost twice as much as using steel from somewhere else? Or would it be better to get twice as much steel to produce twice as much equipment for the same price? Big debates, no doubt, and people will always point to the issue of sovereignty over these decisions. Do we want to be reliant, particularly for national security issues, on wide and complicated international supply chains? Many would argue no, although others would argue keep those supply chains within our NATO allies. Perhaps that is a way through all of this. Now, the elephant in the room in this entire conversation is that there are local elections taking place. Yes, there are local elections on the 1st of May. And someone that's been very loud on the issue of nationalising British steel has been the leader of the Reform Party, Nigel Farage. Could the government be simply responding to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party's calls to nationalise steel? They've been campaigning hard on this issue, especially in the last 7 days. Could this have been the final straw on the camel's back? The issue of less economic import but political import to change the minds of the Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves and the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. Is this to shut down a weakness, a political attack that Labour candidates are feeling up and down the country in these local elections? Quite possibly indeed. And we mustn't look down on the theatre of what will happen this weekend as something that is incidental to the process. In some ways, politics is primarily theatre. It is, after all, the organisation of the country trying to build coalitions for ideas and carry out the execution of those ideas through the executive. Theatre matters here. So perhaps the imagery of bringing members of Parliament back from their holidays, of having to do this on a weekend rather than a weekday in the middle of the Easter holidays. Perhaps it's to do with Donald Trump's tariffs. Perhaps it's to do with the extra defence spending that is coming down the track. But also perhaps it's because it will look spectacular on the television cameras. People will pay attention to this idea having been carried out on a Saturday far more than they would at another point of the week. Is some of this all for show? Is a lot of this simply the theatre of politics from a much more polished Number 10 Downing Street than we saw in the first few months of this administration? Have they finally cracked how to do politics, what's known as the grid in political speak, selling a story rather than just doing the governing work? Well, all of that might be playing into these decisions. We'll be keeping a close eye on it here on GB News. Don't forget to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel for far more as this story develops. And do get involved in the discussions below. Is nationalisation now the only course for British steel? Is this the only way to save domestic production of steel in this country? Or is there a more fundamental question that the politicians are avoiding? And that is the question of the cost of energy in this country. Let's not forget that the majority of steel being produced in the UK requires coking coal. And the government just rejected the planning of a coking coal mine in Northumberland, in Cumbria. And that is a big question indeed. If we're not going to dig any of our own coking coal, well, we're not going to be sovereign and domesticated with regards to our steel supply lines and supply chains. We're going to have to import coking coal from other countries around the world. And doesn't that circle back to that first question of what happens at a time of strained global supply chains? What happens, frankly, at a time of war? Well, do get involved in those conversations in the comments section below. My name's been Tom Harwood, and this has been GBN Originals.